If you're in the US or Japan or China and you're looking to Europe as a center of innovation for emerging climate tech, then where do you look? Clusters, ecosystems, they create like probabilistic benefits. They're not deterministic. In UK and Europe, the academic base, the research base is incredibly strong. I mean, I often think about this in terms of TRL. So maybe TRL 1 to 3, UK and Europe doing pretty well. If we can get more corporate engagement at that kind of first of a kind demonstrator scale, because that's what I think ultimately gives confidence for growth capital to come in. There is a kind of political stability in Europe. Now, it's not perfect by any means, but I've spoken to several US climate tech companies. They are looking to Europe as possible place to come.
For people that don't know you, you are the CEO of Cambridge Cleantech, the UK's leading clean tech innovation network. You're also the co-founder of Climate Tech Supercluster, which we will talk about today. And yeah, as such, I like to chat about a few different topics today, but really to dive into the climate tech ecosystem in Europe. I want to explore what's working, what do you see not working well, and where we could improve. And yeah, I want to understand why initiatives like the Climate Tech Supercluster came to life. Does that sound like a good agenda?
Sounds perfect, yeah.
Before we start, two things I should say. So listeners, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This really helps the show, and it only takes 2 seconds. Second, thank you to Cambridge Consultant, part of Capgemini, and Climate Tech Supercluster for supporting this mini-series at the event. Sam, I want to take you back to the origin story of Supercluster. One of the questions I had for you when I was preparing for this interview is, if we go back to the room where you were chatting with people and thinking about creating this stuff, what were some of the problems you were identifying and why you wanted to solve those problems with Climate Tech Supercluster?
I guess it probably initially came from a business need that we'd kind of seen growing over a period of time. So as Cambridge Cleantech, I've been involved with Cambridge Cleantech for nearly 10 years. And we had a project pretty early on in my participation in that, which was something called Scale Up, which is a European program. So pre-Brexit, when UK was still strongly involved in those kind of UK activities.
That has changed.
Happy days, exactly. Yeah, and that was essentially an open innovation program for European corporates that were looking for emerging climate tech. And I think that established the basic principle or premise around which we were working, which that within Europe, within some of the innovation hotspots, there were emerging technologies that were of great interest potentially to corporate partners, and that they were looking for places where can I find things to decarbonize my supply chain or give me competitive advantage around a kind of our core product line, but with a climate tech bias. So I think, if you like, that was the kind of underlying, challenge and opportunity. I mean, classic open innovation model, I suppose. Through that program, I guess we did the classic open innovation thing. But what happened was, I think what we noticed was that critical mass of climate tech in any one place is hard to find. So it doesn't agglomerate like life sciences does, say in Greater Boston, Silicon Valley, or Cambridge, or even Oxford. Actually, and that's partly because, well, I think it's significantly because climate tech is not really a sector, it's a horizontal. Yeah. So it's across multiple sort of domains and sectors.
I guess part of your comparison there is to say, okay, Silicon Valley, for example, for software is so amazing because you have the Y Combinator for accelerators, so really early helping companies. You have so many talents, and now you have the OpenAI of the world with the LLM model. You have all of the VCs, you have the corporates that are not far with Google and everything. So like you basically have this entire ecosystem of people helping startups to grow. Is that what you were trying to solve for? And do you think that so far, if we take any individual cities, so like London, Paris, Berlin, or Amsterdam, for example, do you think alone they have achieved that critical mass?
So I think the answer would be no. And I think essentially that would be the big challenge, that there's not in climate tech, because it clusters around themes. So, for example, you would have a wind cluster or advanced materials or an energy cluster, but those are not all going to be in one place. So there's not one place to go. And I think we were trying to think, how do where is the one place that you would go? And what happens is you go to Cambridge, you go to London, you go to Amsterdam, but if you're looking for climate tech, then that can be quite a kind of, where do you go for the one that you need, if you see what I mean? And the example that I often give is, for example, in Strathclyde, which is just outside Glasgow, there's something called the Power Network Demonstration Centre. And around that has emerged a kind of grid and an energy tech cluster in terms of emerging technologies. Now, with all due respect to Strathclyde, you have to know that to know that. It's tough. That is not on the global stage. If you're in the US or Japan or China and you're looking to Europe, to UK as a center of innovation for emerging climate tech in energy, water, etc., transport, then where do you look? There's too many places. So it felt valuable to try and create that critical mass, essentially an innovation pipeline. We needed it as a business, but it also felt like that was, it was important then to how you get climate tech to scale at speed, so it can have an impact, in the market ultimately.
And it's funny because, we're talking about climate tech now, but you could also argue that basically Europe is too fragmented anyway, no matter which vertical, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it would be difficult to disagree with that. One of the great things about Europe is its diversity, the range of different sorts of cities and actors. But the challenge that comes with that sometimes is it can feel a bit fragmented. It hasn't quite got the same alignment of capital or kind of innovation that maybe more homogenous kind of entities have, like a Silicon Valley or so on and so forth.
How do we create that alignment? Because different people, different languages, different universities, different type of programs, regulations, man, that's a lot.
This is just a strange sort of like phrase I'm slightly kind of trying out, but in the end, clusters, ecosystems, they create like probabilistic benefits. So they create increased probabilities. They're not deterministic. You can't say if we do A, B, C, then we will get X, Y, Z outcomes. And therefore, you need to focus on activities that bring people together in a way that then you trust that people create that alignment, individuals create that alignment. If a couple of individuals from two organizations have alignment at a personal level, then you begin to get some organizational alignment. Now, sometimes it feels like more art than science, but when we think about what we're doing within the supercluster, it is about a kind of where you can be a bit more deterministic. Is if you create a program of activities around which like very engaged stakeholders, institutions can begin to align, then you get that personal alignment, you get that individual alignment. And that's a little bit why we've got the London, Paris, Amsterdam events. Those are the global cities that are anchoring the Climate Tech Supercluster. Opportunities for like minds, and kind of people with shared ambition and intention to come together around those events. And then you kind of have to trust, smart people, good people do good things when they meet other smart people and good people, if you see what I mean. And then how can we support that? And that's really what the whole thing is about.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as I grew up in my professional career, I realized the impact of your network. And there's this famous saying, your network is your net worth. But actually, you start to realize very quickly that deals happen because people know each other, because they've met in person, because they've talked about their family, whatever. And then they also talked about business and they connected on a human level. And I think if I reflect on the event right now, last night there was an event at the Climate House. Now there is more kind of corporate events or something a bit more structured. But that makes it so much interesting because last night was a chit-chat conversation. You get to meet someone and today you sign the deal. That's a bit idealistic, but that's the way I kind of see it. And I also like the fact that you basically say what you're doing with Supercluster is to increase your surface area of luck for startups and for corporates to meet. So you're basically saying, hey, here's a place where you can meet, and then that's how we will move together. Switching gears a little bit, but I want to understand for someone that's outside of this ecosystem or even just kind of remote somewhere in a city that's not Paris, Amsterdam, London, whatever. What's working well so far in Europe? Let's start with the positive. When we think about collaboration, the clusters and everything, what do you identify as something working well today?
I mean, if we think of innovation as a journey from, I guess, invention through development, through kind of early stage demonstration, and then to wider scale deployment, I think assets in UK and Europe, the academic base, the research base is incredibly strong, and I think that's pretty well established as a world leading kind of asset within Europe. I think the development space is pretty good. I mean, I often think about this in terms of TRL. So maybe TRL 1 to 3, UK and Europe doing pretty well. TRL 4 to 7. Now, a kind of a distinction that's probably important is that the space where I think Climate Tech Supercluster is operating and where we feel we've got most to add is around like frontier tech. So it is quite deep tech. It's hardware, software integration. It's hard tech. Hard tech is hard to do. That's the kind of cliche. So crossing the valley of death from 4 to 6, 7 TRL, I mean, that's tough all over the world. I think I think UK and Europe are decent at that, but there's more to be done. I think those are the technologies that will move the dial ultimately. So once you cross that valley of death, I think again that early stage demonstrator is incredibly important in terms of investor confidence. I think just founder momentum and energy and self-belief, because again, hard tech, I think often you're talking about at least it can be 10 years from when that initial spark of an idea through to actually hitting the market. So keeping people motivated, incentivized through that journey is really important. And then I think one that Europe probably particularly struggles with, UK and Europe, is when it goes to scale. And one way of thinking about that pain is Europe the R&D center for the US? That's a bit of a crude description, but there's a lot of leakage of that early value creation into other markets. Can Europe and the UK retain more of that? So can we do more of that? So those are some of the elements we think are kind of critical to the journey.
What do you think is broken when we think about growing climate tech companies after that TRL 7, starting to go to commercial scale? I have my opinions, but I'll let you answer.
Well, I'd love to hear yours, actually. I mean, I think the thing, so we ran an industrial decarbonization accelerator earlier in the year. I think the biggest thing would be the alignment of capital with deep tech, frontier tech, climate tech. I mean, I can talk about climate tech, but I think that's true in most spaces. But I think there's been a bit of a mismatch sometimes between more like general VC money and climate tech. VC money often is looking for quicker, more kind of accelerated returns, which is fine. I mean, that's the space. That's often what SaaS type platforms and software platforms can and have historically delivered. And that's great. That, good luck if you so. I mean, but I think if we're trying to move the dial on climate tech, deep tech stuff, that requires a different kind of alignment. I think more blended finance. There's a thing called investor partnerships in the UK, where it's a mix of government funding, kind of grant funding, but it's aligned with venture, with venture investment money. And I think more of that, where there's more shared risk, because the deep tech stuff is higher risk. It does take longer. It is more difficult. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, Hugo.
Yeah, I mean, there is this famous saying that we're missing cross capital in Europe. It's interesting because I had this conversation last night with a general partner of a VC firm that I know in Paris. And this person was telling me that actually cross capital firms are struggling to find interesting deals. So the question is, where is that value chain broken? But to your point, I think that it all comes back to capital.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I think where I do see opportunity, I mean, I guess it's a weakness and opportunity, is that if we can get more corporate engagement at that kind of first of a kind demonstrator scale, because that's what I think ultimately will gives confidence for growth capital to come in. Because, if you're an investor, you want to see, how does this technology credibly scale? And 9 times out of 10, maybe even 99 times out of 100, the way that will happen will be through corporate collaboration rather than organic growth of a company. So I think if we can kind of de-risk it and get the corporate partners involved earlier on, as I say, I think you create then a virtuous circle to create more confidence for the investor. And just a little bit to that point, I think I was talking to somebody about this actually at Slush last week, and really there's a lot of stuff done on the supply side for the innovator community about how to be more corporate ready. And in truth, I think some more demand side stuff has to be done. How can corporates become more absorbative of emerging technologies? That I think feels like, again, a space that, there's an opportunity to kind of develop that.
And I guess you chat more with corporates than I do. Do they have the appetite today to actually, first of all, decarbonize, but also buy innovation from climate tech startups?
I think, I don't know if this is controversial, but I think rhetorically, yes. But that's often, so people, I think people want to, the intention is there, but I think it's called the action intention gap or the intention action gap. Anyway, whatever way around it is. That sometimes can where it falls over, that people want to help, they want to get involved, but actually, corporate engagement for a startup can be quite risky. You can spend a year developing a deal and somebody moves job and the whole thing falls apart. So I think, the intention is there, but I do think, more capacity, understanding of how to make that really effective. And I think there's some good models out there that I think we try to build and to share, and it needs a dedicated function. It doesn't happen if it just is assumed. There's an assumption that we know how to do this because there's a lot of asymmetry in the relationship. The corporate's huge and the startup, the innovator typically are not. And how do you manage that relationship? And
I think I'll direct people to the other episode that we're doing today with EDF actually, because that's the core topic of this episode. It's going to be about corporate innovation and how corporates can partner with startups. But if we try to bring a positive note, right? Because I always like to bring the positive as well. Are there examples from Cambridge Cleantech, for example, where you've seen startups successfully actually partnering with corporates and growing at scale?
The real standout success in the Cambridge ecosystem is a company called Nyobolt. I mean, they spun out of the university 2019, and they have a market cap of about 300 million. That's an advanced materials company. And I think the Cambridge ecosystem, what it's very strong at is around supporting emerging frontier tech, so next generation technologies. There's another company that's, again, it's a Cambridge-based company, and it's in the space of where climate tech is meeting AI, and they have a sort of massively iterative design process. They're called Monumo, and they're targeted on how to make electric motors much more energy efficient. And they're getting traction, I can't say with who, but like a number of the kind of large kind of automotive OEMs. So we do see that it's absolutely working. Again, through EDF, gosh, this is through one of the partner organizations we work with, Adia Thermal. They've come through an organization called Carbon 13. That's a venture creation organization based in Cambridge and Berlin. So we definitely see success stories, and more and more happening all the time. And there's that's the space where I think there's more headroom to kind of create those positive connections, as you say.
And you sit at the frontier tech level, so like the next gen of innovation. What do you think will happen in 2026 and onwards in terms of the technologies, right? Because there are quite a few investors listening to this podcast. They're obviously looking for the next, pre-seed seed investment. Where should they be looking at?
Yeah, I think industrial decarbonization is a big one. Obviously, there's huge challenges. Some of those hard to abate sectors, and how do we do that? And that becomes ever more important. I think kind of technologies which are going to support like the reduction in energy and water consumption in data centers and in kind of AI kind of delivery, because obviously that's putting huge stress on networks, on grids, on water systems. UK in particular, I mean, getting a grid connection, getting kind of a license for water extraction for these things is incredibly difficult. So obviously those are where the huge markets are. And again, I came from a session earlier in the week with some of my colleagues from Cambridge and, the Cambridge Graphene Centre and work they're doing on photonics to make, I guess, I think a sort of data exchange more energy efficient at massive scale. So those are the spaces I think that are super interesting.
When we think about Europe and where it stands right now, including the UK in Europe, why does it matter to have this alignment between the different clusters that we have? Obviously, a lot of people talk about Europe's sovereignty right now, and increasingly important securing your supply chain as a corporate and everything. But from your seat, why does that discussion and collaboration matters more than ever before?
Yeah, I think there are two critical elements: the climate crisis, which means, we need some of these technologies to succeed as a planet, and I think Europe is the leading continent for that. I think. Obviously, what China's doing in terms of massive infrastructure, but I think in terms of that emerging frontier tech, that remains where Europe has kind of global competitive advantage.
Are we ahead of the US on that?
I think what's shifted, and one of the things that I think is exciting about the supercluster idea is there is a kind of political stability in Europe. Now, it's not perfect by any means, but I've spoken to several US climate tech companies. They are looking to Europe as possible place to come. Now, it's a very dynamic situation. There's always more money in the US, so that there's always kind of pros and cons. But another guy who actually he set up a business, made money in Silicon Valley. He was back in India, but he was looking to European policy legislation as the thing that he needed to follow for his kind of climate SaaS business. So I think Europe has a very strong leadership role in that respect. So it matters because of the planet, and because actually that's why we do it, because actually ultimately we want climate positive impact from the companies that we're working with. The theory of change is we believe those companies exist within some of the clusters or will emerge over the next kind of period of time. And we need to give them as much help to kind of get there and make a difference and have impact. The other then is, I think, is economic development. Mario Draghi in the Draghi Report talked about an existential threat to European ways of life. And, how do you maintain those kind of strong European social models in the face of global competition? And I genuinely, and on the back of that, it was around requiring new engines of economic growth. I think this is a space where Europe is leading, can lead, and could be the global leader. And I think that underpins the kind of the vision, the mission of the Climate Tech Supercluster is to do what we can to support that journey. Of course, it will require many actors to kind of believe in that, and it happens to some of it happens organically, but if we can accelerate it, that's why it matters. That's definitely the why it's important to have that alignment. It's
Lovely. Well, a very interesting conversation today. If we should leave people with something today, key takeaway from that conversation, what would that be?
I think the key takeaway for me is that it's easy to kind of get carried away with big scale. Like, it's a planetary problem, it's a Europe-wide thing, it's a climate tech supercluster. But ultimately, the change comes from human interaction, from people meeting other people, having ideas, taking those ideas forward, finding more friends and capital, and going on that journey, and doing that kind of through multiple interactions, building multiple relationships. So that's the one thing is that you as individuals do make the difference, and and it's all about then that connectivity and kind of building it together.
Yeah, well, love that. I think that's a really good takeaway. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I appreciate it. For people that are listening all the way through the podcast, where can they find you if they want to participate in one event? What's the best way to contribute?
Oh yeah, I go to the website. So climatetechsupercluster.com. There's information about our upcoming events, how to get in touch with us. Yeah, the flagship activities are the London, Paris, and Amsterdam events. Amsterdam's in the diary already, March the 19th next year. London will be part of London Climate Action Week. And then hopefully we'll be back in Paris sometime next year as well. Yeah, and please do reach out. Yeah, that's what it's all about. And thank you, Hugo, for it's been a great conversation.
And I mean, if people need an introduction, please reach out to me. Always happy to make an introduction. Well, listeners, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or to give us a follow and a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This really helps the show and help us showcase great innovation happening in Europe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.